All right, so let's move on to what's been the biggest story in college football and college sports. I would say the last week here sparked a lot of debate, but it's done now. Nico Iamaleava has left Tennessee, and look, we can talk about the circumstances under how this happened. We got into a pretty good discussion about it the other day. So if you want to see that video, go back to our last video on the page. But what we're going to do here is kind of look at potential landing spots for him. I think it has to be a very specialized case wherever he lands because of, look, I think publicly the perception hasn't been great bringing him into the locker room. It needs to be a certain type of situation, maybe a bit of desperation, I would say, by whoever takes him. Not that I don't think he's a talented player, but again, at this juncture, you're bringing your starting quarterback or what you would perceive to be your starting quarterback. So let's take a look at some of these potential landing spots, D.
Yeah, my favorite, hands down, would be North Carolina with Bill Belichick. Maybe that's just me trying to get the biggest story, but I really think this makes a lot of sense, and I'll explain why. It's funny. We remember Bill Belichick when he was in New England. It was all about limiting distractions. But now that he's in college, I think it's the opposite. He wants attention, maybe following the Dion model to a degree, knowing that you got to recruit, you got to convince guys to come to your school. So attention is advertising, it's marketing. That doesn't help you for the New England Patriots. Like, promoting the Patriots doesn't help the Patriots, right? Because you're going to draft who you're going to draft. Free agency doesn't matter. But recruiting is about attention. So I think Belichick is very much focused on splash, attention. You saw his girlfriend walking around spring practice in high heels. I don't know if that video went viral. So this one, who put the crystal ball in?
Brennan Sonnen from Florida State. This was 30 minutes ago. Just put this in. So this is live right now. And Florida State, a team, spoiler alert, that we'll mention here as a potential landing spot. But I think that's the first crystal ball prediction there for him.
This would be my prediction as well, just because it makes sense. You heard Cooper Tanya mention this on 247, which is, from a PR standpoint, Nico's name's a little bit tarnished right now because of the way this whole thing went down. Go to Bill Belichick. He could say, hey, I'm with a Super Bowl coach. He's going to develop me as a pro. You could justify it from his standpoint. Obviously, Belichick kind of cleans up his image, let's say, by bringing him in. So from that standpoint, it makes sense. And they really were in the portal market for a quarterback. We know that. They brought in Ryan Brown from Purdue, originally from close to our neck of the woods here in the west coast of Southern Florida. But that's not a proven player. He's only started a couple games, shown flashes, but this is not a long-time starter. Of course, anytime you talk about the quarterback situation with UNC, you got to talk about Bryce Baker, their top prospect, super athletic basketball player, high 4-star prospect. They already did the edit.
Or already got edits. I bet you if I search his name with some of these other schools, we'll get edits as well, though.
Billy Tuesday, appreciate you joining us. We'll talk Buckeyes in a second here. He says, Nico brings a lot of noise and scrutiny with him. Could see most programs not want to deal with it. I agree with that totally. USC, Notre Dame, they're not on our list. They were natural fits. I don't think they're going to go in that direction because of what you're explaining, Billy. But I think UNC, when you see the 20-year-old girlfriend in high heels, when they're trying to get on Hard Knocks, when they're on McAfee every other day, they're trying to drum up attention. They're more similar. It's crazy how crazy is the world, Pete? UNC is more similar to Dion in Colorado than anywhere else, right?
Yeah.
So with
that
Bill
Lil
Belichick,
Wayne at practice the other day.
There you go. So I think UNC fits there. I think the one thing you got to balance is this going to scare off a Bryce Baker? But if Nico's probably trying to be one and done anyways, he's eligible. So 1 year Nico, transition to Bryce Baker, that can make sense. They're going to spend money. They sniffed around on Mateer. We heard about that. They more than sniffed around on Mateer. They did a big push for Mateer. I think they sniffed around on Mendoza as well, which I thought was a pretty natural fit as well. But Nico, to me, to UNC, makes a lot of sense. You could have a run-based kind of offense where he's, doing similar to what you did in Tennessee, or probably more likely if you're paying him a lot of money, you say,
let him air it out, yeah.
We need you to throw. And then he is able to throw. We've got ACC defenses against him. He can
I was going to say, look, I'm not saying he's Cam Ward, but we saw what Cam Ward was able to do against ACC defenses pretty consistently last year. So I think I would probably think they're going to let him throw it around a bit more than he did at Tennessee.
Yeah, and Carson Beck just made a similar move, right? Going from the SEC to the ACC, going to face different competition, a little easier competition there. So this fit, I love. I think it should happen. I don't know if it will happen, but to me, this is where Nico should go. You go Nico to Bryce Baker. I mean, talk about showtime in Chapel Hill, man. They got a lot of size in the portal. We talked about it when we talked about their portal approach. I think they could use some sizzle, right? Just some impact kind of guys. They got some guys on defense that I like. Love House. Love some of the offensive linemen that they've been able to bring in, Daniel King and some other guys. But they need some sizzle, some offensive sizzle. You've had some of the best quarterbacks in the ACC in recent years between Howell, then Drake May. Let's get Nico on board and put the cameras on, let the fireworks go. I like this fit.
All right, a couple more options here for him potentially. Let's talk about Florida State, who brought in obviously Thomas Castellanos in the offseason from Boston College, more of a running type. In a Gus Malzahn offense, you expect him to be pretty effective in that scheme, but I think Nico would give you a different element in the passing game.
Yeah, we've seen FSU go the portal route lately. They struggled in quarterback recruiting. Luke Kromenhoek was their big quarterback bullet from a high school standpoint. He ends up going to Mississippi State. So they're living in the portal world. Brought in DJU last year, didn't work out. My personal opinion, that was more to do with what FSU had around him than him himself. Not that he's a world beater, number one five-star prospect that he was billed at, but I think he was more like what you saw at Oregon State than what you saw at FSU. He didn't have enough around him. Kane's cat, he threw a 5. Not a big fan of Luke Kromenhoek. I thought he had talent, man. Let's see how he develops. But
it looks like he's losing that job right now, Mississippi State.
Is he really?
Yeah,
maybe
Kane's, what I read the other day.
cat could be right on that one. But Kromenhoek was a safety in high school. He was less reps as a quarterback need to develop. Either way, FSU, DJU didn't work. Now you got Castellanos. I heard he's not really tearing it up. It's hard to tell because FSU keeps those practices so tight, but the word out there, based on what you saw with some of the inconsistencies, is that Castellanos is not necessarily a Jordan Travis, at least at this stage.
Oh, and we talked about if it's going to be a team, there has to be maybe a sense of desperation. And I would say that there's a bit of that right now from Mike Norvell in Florida State.
Fan base could use some juice. There's a lot going on here. To me, you add a Nico, same thing we just talked about, SEC to ACC. Probably ask him to air it out. It makes some sense. The problem with Florida State, I think, on this fit, which is why I like UNC as a better fit. He could say, I'm going to play with Bill Belichick. He coached the greatest quarterback of all time. I want to be a pro-style passer. I want to be a pro. Let me throw the ball. You go to FSU, it's Gus Malzahn, right? You are going to be much more similar to what you had at Tennessee, which he said he didn't like that offense. And I don't think the talent around him is going to be what he had at Tennessee last year, certainly not from a running game standpoint. So you go to Florida State, and now you're handing it off a lot. You're playing not necessarily a pro-style offense. You yourself are running probably more than you like. He's capable of doing it. But to me, I think it makes a lot of sense for Florida State. If I'm Florida State, I'm putting my money down trying to get Nico and add him. I think it'd make a huge difference on the team. But if I'm Nico, I probably want to throw the ball more than what he's doing.
Next school here that's a potential fit, SMU. They brought in Tyler Van Dyke in the offseason, may not be ready for the season. Kevin Jennings, of course, had some good moments for them last year, but inconsistencies, I would say. Why does this fit make sense to you with Rhett Lashley at the helm?
This was actually brought up by, I want to say, Andrew Ivins. It was on the Ivins Patania podcast. I had not thought of it because Kevin Jennings did a really nice job last year. Obviously had the tough game against Penn State in the playoff. But once he brought it up, it made sense when you think about it. Some similar issues to what we saw with Florida State, right? As far as, is it the offense you necessarily want to develop in for the pros? I think if you look at what SMU has done, Lashley's done maybe more with passing quarterbacks than Malzahn has, right? TVD, when he was at Miami with Rhett Lashley, put up huge numbers, really was on the radar as an NFL draft prospect. Jennings passed a lot better than I think people expected this year. So 3 ACC schools, a third ACC school. So that SEC to ACC conversion that Beck did, that's another factor here with this fit. Better team probably last year than UNC and FSU. They were in the ACC championship, obviously in the playoff, but the opponents are going to be a little weaker. Dallas, They got money at SMU. They might want to make a splash. Jennings had that tough playoff game. Maybe they say that Nico will put us over the top to win the ACC, win a playoff game, maybe get an easier playoff game if we win the ACC. I could see it from SMU's perspective, even though they have capable options there. Nico, similar questions to what you had at Florida State from an offensive fit standpoint, in my opinion. I would go in a much more pro-style direction if I am Nico, just both for PR to say, hey, this is why, I didn't leave Tennessee because they didn't pay me. I left Tennessee because I didn't want to run this offense. Is that true? No. I mean, Joe Milton's in the pros. Hendon Hooker's in the pros. I don't think that's really much. There's much to that, but there's a PR game to be played. Nico's stock right now publicly, not football-wise, but just in terms of what people say about him, is not where he wants it to be. So UNC, I think, is the easiest path to rebuild. SMU, I think, is a better fit than FSU because the team's at a higher place. They were just in the ACC championship game, but similar concerns with the offensive style.
And then the last team here, I think they've been pretty heavily rumored, and that's UCLA.
Yeah, look, obviously closer to home, right? USC was mentioned a ton. Now he goes potentially to a school in the same city, a school that probably has less competition.
Cachet,
well, yeah, less cachet, but less competition at quarterback. I mean, Jaden Maiava, who's another Polynesian quarterback,
is good.
It's pretty good, right? I thought he was actually better than Nico last year on terms of the production. They were both kind of inconsistent. Nico, a more talented player, I would say, just because of the pure twitch and arm strength and just natural talent. Although Maiava is not exactly a slouch in the talent department. But that's like a more of a true quarterback battle. You could see a situation where they might want Maiava over Nico. And then when you added all the other stuff off the field, I think USC probably said we're good. UCLA, you got Tino Sunseri. I know that's a hire that they are extremely excited about, over $1 million. So if you're Deshaun Foster, you say, okay, we got a new up-and-coming, very highly valued offensive coordinator, a guy that did a really, really nice job at Indiana, pro-style type passing game. Joey Aguilar, that's your guy. Maybe you're excited about him, but you're not excited as you would be with a Nico. I think if you're in a conference like the Big Ten and you don't have other bullets where you say, hey, we have this great defense or this incredible skill position, and you need something to kind of give you a chance against these more talented teams. Nico unleashed, playing free, hometown, having fun, throwing the ball around with a very, very, very good offensive coordinator. Aside from UNC, I think this is the best fit. The only difference between this fit and UNC is I think Big Ten, you're talking about much tougher competition defensively than the ACC, but it makes a lot of sense both personally in terms of going back to the West Coast and then football-wise because you're going to walk right into the starting job and you're going to have a coordinator that is a passing-focused coordinator that can really elevate your game.